The Geneva International Press Conference was in full swing. Cameras flashed as journalists from around the world gathered to discuss global economic development. Among them sat Nigel Pemberton, a veteran BBC correspondent known for his sharp wit and even sharper tongue. At the back of the room, quietly reviewing his notes, sat Dalisay Magbanua, a Filipino economist and data analyst who had just been invited to speak on Southeast Asian innovation. Nigel leaned toward his colleague and muttered loud enough for nearby journalists to hear, "I do wonder why they've invited someone from the Philippines. What could they possibly contribute? Beach resorts and call centers?" A few uncomfortable chuckles rippled through the audience. The moderator introduced Dalisay, who walked calmly to the podium. Before he could begin his prepared remarks, Nigel raised his hand. "Yes, Mr. Pemberton," the moderator acknowledged. Nigel stood, his voice dripping with condescension. "I have a question before we begin. Mr. Magbanua, with all due respect, the Philippines has long been known as a country that exports labor rather than innovation. Your GDP per capita lags far behind developed nations. What exactly qualifies you to speak on global innovation trends when your country is still struggling with basic infrastructure?" The room fell silent. Some journalists shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned forward, anticipating the response. Dalisay smiled gently and set down his notes. "Thank you for that question, Mr. Pemberton. I appreciate your candor. Would you mind if I addressed it directly?" "Please do enlighten us," Nigel replied, settling back into his seat with a smug expression. Dalisay's demeanor remained calm, almost gracious. "You mentioned that the Philippines exports labor. You're absolutely correct. We do. Over 10 million Filipinos work abroad, sending home remittances that support not just their families, but entire communities. But let me ask you something, Mr. Pemberton. Why do you think the world wants Filipino workers?" Nigel shrugged. "Cheap labor, presumably." "No," Dalisay replied firmly. "It's because Filipinos are among the most educated, adaptable, and English-proficient workers in Asia. We have a literacy rate of over 96%. Our nurses are trusted in hospitals across the UK, including the NHS, where they make up the largest group of foreign healthcare workers. Without Filipino nurses, your healthcare system would face a catastrophic shortage." Murmurs of agreement spread through the audience. Nigel's smile began to fade. Dalisay continued. "You mentioned infrastructure. Yes, we have challenges. But did you know that Manila has one of the most advanced digital payment systems in the world? GCash and similar platforms have brought financial inclusion to millions who never had bank accounts. We're leading Southeast Asia in fintech adoption." Dalisay's voice grew stronger, more passionate. "You asked what qualifies me to speak on innovation. Let me tell you. The Philippines has the fastest-growing startup ecosystem in Southeast Asia. We've produced unicorn companies in logistics and fintech. Our business process outsourcing industry doesn't just answer phones. We provide high-value services in software development, animation, and digital marketing to companies worldwide, including several British firms." He paused, letting that sink in. "But beyond statistics, Mr. Pemberton, let me tell you what truly defines Filipino innovation. Resilience. We're a nation that faces an average of 20 typhoons per year. We've rebuilt cities devastated by natural disasters. We've created communities that thrive despite challenges you couldn't imagine. That resilience has bred creativity, resourcefulness, and an unshakable work ethic." The room was now completely silent. Several journalists were taking notes furiously. "You speak of GDP per capita," Dalisay continued. "Yes, we're not as wealthy as the UK. But wealth isn't just measured in pounds or dollars. It's measured in human capital, in potential, in the ability to rise above circumstances. Every day, Filipinos prove that poverty doesn't equal lack of intelligence or capability." Dalisay's tone softened, but his words cut deeper. "You know what I find interesting, Mr. Pemberton? You work for the BBC, a venerable institution. But do you know who keeps the BBC running behind the scenes? Filipino producers, editors, and technical staff. When you travel for your assignments, who cleans your hotel rooms? Who serves your meals? Who ensures your comfort?" Nigel's face had gone from confident to ashen. "It's often Filipinos," Dalisay said quietly, "and yet we never demand recognition. We simply do excellent work with dignity and pride. We don't mock others for their challenges because we understand struggle. We've lived it. He leaned forward slightly. So when you ask what qualifies me to speak here, I'll tell you. It's the same thing that qualifies the Filipino nurse who might one day save your life, or the Filipino engineer who designed components in the device you're using to record this conference, or the Filipino programmer who helped build the apps you use every day. The audience erupted in applause. Several people stood. Nigel remained seated, staring at the table in front of him. When the applause died down, Dalisay smiled warmly. But I don't say this to embarrass you, Mr. Pemberton. I say this because it's important we move beyond stereotypes. Every nation has strengths and struggles. The UK has given the world literature, scientific breakthroughs, and democratic institutions. The Philippines has given the world compassion, resilience, and millions of workers who bridge cultures and build connections across continents. He gathered his notes. Perhaps instead of asking what qualifies someone to speak, we should ask what we can learn from each other. I came here today to share data on mobile banking adoption in rural Southeast Asia, but I think the more important lesson is about respect, recognizing that every nation, every person, has value to contribute. Dalisay looked directly at Nigel. I harbor no ill will toward you, Mr. Pemberton. I hope you'll stay for my presentation. You might learn something. The room erupted in applause again, louder this time. Several journalists approached Dalisay after the session, requesting interviews. News outlets around the world picked up the story. Later that evening, as Dalisay was leaving the conference center, someone called out behind him, "Mr. Magbanua, wait, please." It was Nigel Pemberton, looking considerably more humble than he had hours before. "I owe you an apology," Nigel said quietly. "What I said was ignorant and disrespectful. You're right about everything. My own sister works with Filipino nurses in Manchester, and she's told me countless times how professional and skilled they are. I let my prejudices speak instead of my knowledge." Dalisay extended his hand. "We all have biases, Mr. Pemberton. What matters is whether we're willing to confront them. Your apology is accepted." Nigel shook his hand firmly. "I'd like to do a feature on Filipino innovation for the BBC. Would you be willing to be interviewed?" Dalisay smiled. "I'd be honored. But only if you also interview the Filipino nurse in Manchester, the programmer in Manila, and the teacher in a rural school who's using solar panels to power computers for her students. Tell the whole story." "Deal," Nigel said, and for the first time that day, his smile was genuine. As Dalisay walked into the Geneva evening, he thought about home, about the street vendors in Manila who built their own businesses from nothing, about the fishermen in his hometown who navigated storms with courage, about his own mother who had worked 3 jobs to send him to university. He'd spoken for all of them today, and he'd do it again whenever necessary. Because the Philippines wasn't just a country, it was millions of stories of perseverance, dignity, and quiet strength that deserved to be told.